Welcome back to another official Narrative Assassin update video with your host, yours truly, Hussein Hill. Great to be back with you guys once again rather. So this video will not be being released on the usual time frame that I've been planning to release these update videos on, which is supposed to be every Tuesday, we'll say late Tuesday morning to Tuesday afternoon, early evening. This video will probably be being released, most likely being released sometime Wednesday morning. So I do apologize for that because of my schedule's been extremely busy. And we're just going to briefly go into logistics because logistics will kind of they will kind of serve as updates of actual logistics as well as just plugging my shit, as it were. So, working on the article, as I told you guys last time in my last update video, I'm getting back into writing. I have 3 articles scheduled for this month and the subsequent following 2 months therein. So the article should be out by the end of this week. Expect it. Look for it. I'll have links in the description to promote it. It will be being promoted by a third party, an organization ran by an individual who has been a big help to me throughout the months/years online, specifically on X. With spaces and content, and just a loyal, good guy. So we'll be pushing out that this week, specifically this week, if not the beginning of next week. That's kind of really it. Again, as you can plainly see, no episodes yet, no full-length episodes. We're still working on that. Once they come through, we're gonna have the intro, the outro. We're gonna upgrade the microphone situation, the audio situation. So a lot of that's gonna happen. But right now, just a good old-fashioned update videos, raw, bare bones, DIY, as it were, and all that. So, once again, guys, also, if you guys like the content, love the channel, please make sure to follow me in the descriptions below. Follow me on YouTube, follow me on Rumble, follow me on X, follow me on Telegram, and if you like the content and the brand as well, please make sure to donate what you can when you can, either at buymeacoffee/Hussein Hill, where you can sign up to be a consistent month-to-month follower and supporter, or for one-time donations, go to a Cash App at NAHHill86, donate directly. So that is the logistics and the plugging and the shilling out of the way. Now on to the subject matter of this video. Truth be told, I wasn't going to do this video initially. I wanted to find something else that wasn't so necessarily like pop culture related, or we'll say entertainment, sort of media entertainment, sort of controversial or scandal, controversial entertainment news or scandalous, basically. I wanted to find something more that was less topical and more newsworthy, but this is the news. And the news is this conversation, is this scandal of Nick Fuentes, Myron Gaines, Sneako, and the Tate brothers, and Clavicular, hitting the town over the weekend in Miami, clubbing, kind of, club/bar hopping in Miami over the weekend, and specifically going to a club and being seen on camera dancing and throwing up salutes to Ye's viral song, we'll call it NHH, because this video is going to be released on YouTube. I was debating whether or not to release this video on YouTube, but I decided to do so. So I obviously have to watch my language. Side note too, it's very funny that YouTube, you can't use any language that can be, that is like literally or can be misconstrued as a racial or misogynistic slur, but you can say fuck, shit, asshole. You can say all these sort of like lowbrow, just run-of-the-mill curse words, which kind of tells you a lot, all you need to know about this culture. And actually kind of relates to this story a little bit too. So this story clearly is ridiculous. There is an absurdity to this story that should be obviously understood. And I want to kind of, because a lot of the themes from my last update video will resurface, they will be readdressed in this update video, because, it's the same types of people, it's the same sort of phenomenon, it's this sort of, this reality that we're living in now of hyper-performance, liberalism, and coupled with feminism. And more specifically, I think the most important thing that this story reveals is the fear of an authentic effective, relatable face of revanchist far-right politics. I think those are the three themes that we're really going to touch upon. So let's start with the sort of like dissecting the conversation of the performative nature of all this with regards to the performative nature of the outrage surrounding these men going to a club. I don't remember the name of the club, and it's not really that important if we're being honest. But we will discuss later on how the club reacted. I think there's a obviously politically relevant point to discussing that particular aspect of the story. But let's start with the sort of like, let's start with the end of the story and work our way backward. Let's start with the reaction from the public, the reaction from social media, because the reaction to social media is really where the story lies, in my humble opinion. So the reaction ranged from your usual sort of nonsense, people calling them gay and making fun of the fact that they're hyper-focused on their fashion and they're multiracial, so how can they be multiracial and be white nationalist, or how can they be multiracial and advocate for far-right politics, all these sorts of things. And the demographics, most specifically, that were hyper-focused on criticizing these men, it was these demographics. It's some variant or combination therein, but specifically these demographics: liberals of any stripe, homosexuals, women, brown people, non-whites, and white nationalists. Like that was, and you might say that's everybody. Well, and of course the Jews, but that's everybody. It's like, well, sort of, kind of, but it was specifically people of those demographics, who are invested in those, we'll say, identifiers of those demographics, right? So with the women and homosexuals, there's sort of like a combination there of feminists, right? The liberals and leftists sort of overlap with that as well. The non-whites, right, they kind of oscillate between, being anti-racist to just being, we'll say, socially conservative with a bend towards being anti-white, with latent anti-whiteism, a latent sense of like deflecting white identitarianism. The Jews, obviously, with the fact that the song was revolving around Hitler, revolving around a controversial figure like Hitler. The Jews obviously have a cultural investment in shutting this down. And then the white nationalists, the white fucking nationalists, were also the first ones to go in on the story. So I want to try to address the only claim that someone can derive, or the only assertion that someone can make about this whole situation that is, I think, remotely salient. 1 second here. That has any sense of like moral consistency or like coherence, which is the continuous sort of assertion or continuous sort of accusation by particularly people on the right wing. This is a particular thing to people on the right wing, ranging from sort of like your nominal conservatives, nominal Christian traditionalists types, and white nationalists. Their kind of reoccurring critique about this whole situation really lays into this idea of how can Nick Fuentes call himself a Catholic integralist? How can he call himself a nationalist of any stripe, sort of this moral arbiter, when he's hanging out with people like Andrew Tate, and Tristan Tate, the Tate brothers, people that made their money off of pornography. People have tried to be like, well, they're sex traffickers, and they've engaged in sex trafficking, and we're going to get to that in a second. But that's sort of been the claim. It's not true. Like we just have to address that right now. The claims of the Tate brothers engaging in sex trafficking isn't true. But that aside, basically the idea is that they're immoral, right? Andrew Tate's a Muslim. Sneako is a Muslim. These are non-believers. These are heretics. They're, clavicular as well. He's an atheist, basically, hyper-individualist. He entertains basically, shallow, vapid appeals to vanity, self-obsession, so on and so forth. All right. So again, and I do want to kind of revisit the earlier statement that I just made a few minutes ago, which is to say that there is no evidence that Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate previously or currently have ever sex trafficked anybody. The reality is, and this will be a point addressed later on in this video as well, the reality is the women in question that were involved with the Andrew Tate or the Tate empire, the sex empire, which admittedly is immoral, were complicit, right? They were complicit in the decision to engage in pornography with these men. That is a fact. So the idea that, and I love this idea too, because this is going to be a recurring theme again in this video. I love whenever we address the conversation of the fallen nature of people in the world, it's always directed towards punishing and criticizing and cudgeling men. Women always get a pass. Women in 2026 always get a free pass to be as degenerate, either currently or previously, whether it be in their past or currently. They can be as degenerate, disheveled, disgusting, demonic as possible, but the men are expected to somehow rise above the filth and the dregs of society, rise above the fallen nature of modern day America, and become these arbiters of moral perfection, these visions and these archetypes of moral perfection rather. This is complete bullshit. This is obviously feminism. This is obviously a unequal analysis from a feministic lens. So that needs to be addressed, I guess, at the forefront. We're going to be addressing that later on as well as we move forward with the discussion of this nonsense. But so let's just start with, again, taking off the sort of hyperbole of the conversation of Tate and all these sorts of people. And the one claim that you can make about, why is Nick associating with these people is that these people are sinners, right? You can't say they're engaging in criminality because they're just not, and there's no evidence to prove that. The courts have tried to do so specifically with the Tate brothers. They're not engaging in criminality. They're engaging in sin. So he's like, okay, well, how, Mr. Fuentes, Nick Fuentes, how can you call yourself this right-wing revanchist, this Christian nationalist, white nationalist revanchist, who wants to usher in this society, this world to which we appeal to morality, and morality governs our society, when you are associating with sinners? And the obvious answer, but I guess it's not so obvious now in 2026, is that we live in the fallen world. And so, and this I want to get into this specifically because I think it's worth investigating and kind of like unpacking, so that people understand this is not like a flippant excuse. This is not to say that we should lean into sin. This is not to say that we should engage in sin and prop up sin and celebrate sin. It is to say that we live in the fallen world. And if you're going to exist in the fallen world, and you're going to try to navigate political, professional, or social networks, 9 times out of 10, specifically high-level professional, political, and social networks, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be around people that are flawed. Number one, in general, if you walk outside your house, you're going to be around people that are flawed. You're going to be around people that are sinful, that are sinful, because we're all sinful. But more specifically, in these sort of like high-level endeavors of networking and social and political and media savvy and trying to build these infrastructures and these alliances, you're going to be faced with a lot of people who are engaged in a lot of sin. And so the question really isn't why are you engaging with sin. The only question is, or why are you engaging with people that are sinful or hyper sinful or unabashedly sinful, shamelessly engaging in sin or heresy? That's really not the question. The question really is Nick losing his moral mooring by engaging with these people? Is Nick going to the club, in general, going to the club, hanging out with these people, doing cocaine, having promiscuous sex? Is he doing that? From all available sources, including the footage of the shenanigans that occurred over the weekend, that didn't happen. And, there's another sort of novel idea with regard to this particular conversation. Not only is it actually Christian to be able to be around sinners, to be around fallen, and maintain your morality, it's also like a test of your particular temperance and discipline. If you can be around people who are engaging in, alcoholism, they're engaging in, we'll say, promiscuity, right? They're hitting up the club, they're taking girls home, and you're just sitting there vibing, you're just sitting there chilling, just sipping on like a Red Bull or soda, like a non-alcoholic drink, and you're just relaxing and just hanging out with your friends. That's like a level of like temperance and discipline and, we'll say, Christian tolerance that is sort of expected from Christians and Catholics. So this the moralizing rather coming out of these camps it's mythical, because again, if we go through all the aforementioned demographics, lesbians and women mostly who are feminists, and homosexuals. Homosexuality is an abomination. The majority of women in this world are engaging in this sort of like hyper domination of men, this sort of perversion of the divine hierarchy of men and women and how that's supposed to act, how the dynamics are actually supposed to work with one another. So they're perverting that on a biblical existential level. So that's a sin. You have white nationalists who by and large are pagans. They're fucking demon worshippers. And for the ones that claim to be Christian, they just became Christian recently to maintain their fucking brand's sake. They just embraced the cross because they realized that, and this really happened specifically in 2022, if we're being honest. We track back the trends of when Christian nationalism became in vogue on the dissident right. Much of these white nationalists embraced the cross, not for an earnest awakening to Christ, but rather to rehabilitate, to rebrand themselves, because they knew that LARPing for fucking Norse pagan demons or fucking comic book character-esque gods was fucking ridiculous, right? And then, of course, we have the leftists and liberals. As we mentioned in the last update video, they hate God, and the majority of them, they happily endorse and engage in and celebrate sin and debauchery and hedonism. And then, of course, last but not least, the non-whites. And it's, again, as we mentioned in the last update video, the majority of them just hate white America, anything that's right-wing, anything that is that will signal nationalism or nativism of the West. And of course, we also mentioned the Jews. And the Jews have a particular distinct motivation for their destruction of these men in particular, and trying to use this incident as a way to destroy these men in particular. And we're going to get to that later on in this update video. But they're the ones that have the most reason to be upset, because what happened in that club, and I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but what happened in that club was the normalization of the far right. That's what it was. And we can actually move again. We can actually move to this, because I am kind of getting ahead of myself. I'm kind of all over the place because there's a lot to cover in this, but that's why the Jews in particular are upset. But we'll put a pin in that for a second, and we will revisit that towards the end of this update video. We're going to move on from sort of the absurd. Oh yeah, this was the last thing I was going to say as well too. So we address all the moralizing. We address all this conversation about, people, why are you hanging out with these degenerates? It's like you're moralizing, you are tone policing, it's disingenuous, and the majority of you, if not all of you, are engaging in overt or implicit signaling and engaging of sin. But there's another aspect too, I guess, before we move on to the conversation about the how this exposes the embrace of liberalism and feminism, which is entrenched in our culture. The other conversation is that this is just lame. Like, this also proves definitively, and I hate to give props to John Doyle, who I used to be a big fan of before he sold out to Zionists, essentially sold out to Jews. This proves him specifically, but he's also engaging in this. So it proves his statement definitively true, which applies to him more so than the people he's talking about. Politics is in fact Hollywood for ugly people. It is in fact a realm of theater kids. Everyone in politics is a fucking dork. And I remember this too. I talked about this in one of my previous older narrative assassin videos back when I was the first time I was on YouTube. That video has been lost to time because it's been erased. But I talked about how I don't really care about going to conventions. I don't really like going to political action committees or conventions. The only one that seems relatively appealing to me is AFPAC, and that one is basically on hiatus indefinitely. But it seems appealing to me because it seems to be the only political convention essentially, or event that addresses real, authentic, right-wing politics in a decorumed and professional manner. But even besides that, even with that, if I'm being honest, another reason why I never liked really going to these events is because I treat politics as a profession and a job, and not just as a paycheck, but it's like, okay, this is my responsibility. I'm engaging in this conversation. I'm engaging in this professional iteration of trying to fight for the interests of my nation. So this is a 24/7 job, whether I'm in an office, whether I'm at home, whether I'm, on and off the clock, so to speak. There is no on the clock for me. I'm 24/7 on social media. I'm 24/7 trying to come up with content. I'm 24/7 trying to organize with other political activists, operators, grassroots organizers in the area, trying to develop new ideas, trying to develop potential new events, new strategies for pushing my political agenda forward. It's work. So for me, I never really enjoyed the idea of going to an event full of nerds who just use politics as a way to feel cool. I mean, that's all it is. They use this shit as a way to feel cool. The majority of them don't care about politics. And again, ACPAC notwithstanding, because I think ACPAC is something novel and different and benevolent, more or less. I've never been, but I've heard great things. But I know about CPAC. I know about TPUSA. I've helped organize statewide conventions for my local, or rather statewide North Carolina Republican Party. These are just social events for fucking nerds that have no aura, no riz, and they use this event to grandstand and moralize on the stage for their particular campaign, for their particular donor, to target a particular donor class or a particular interested donor or a gaggle of interested donors, to pay them to line their pockets. But after they're done aggrandizing their particular, narrative of how they're the real conservatives, the real Christian, the real MAGA, the real fill in the cliche appeal to the base that you want to bolster your political profile, they will go to a hotel and they will engage in the most hedonistic, debaucherous nonsense with other fucking nerds. Like, it's a bunch of people who never got laid. Like, literally. And the irony is that these people will make fun of, like, Nick Fuentes for being a virgin. And that's a W, obviously. I think that's honestly a W. And millennials and Gen Xers, we unfortunately did not have the sort of a cultural figure in the ether that was charismatic, that appealed to us to kind of promote these values. So God bless Nick Fuentes. And, that's great for the Gen Zers. But point being, a lot of these millennials in particular and Gen Xers, and some Zoomers, but a lot of the Zoomers that are doing this being paid to do it. They kind of want to ingratiate themselves with the dying millennial Gen Xer GOP class of political, I guess, relevance or elitism. But a lot of people, the irony is that they're like, oh, like Nick's never gotten laid. Nick is this. It's like, you guys are the weirdos. Like, you range from like actual political nerds that just get off on going to these conventions, or like losers, like white trash losers, fucking failed musicians, just freaks, just like complete freaks who are, and listen, there's nothing wrong with being weird and acknowledging that you're a fucking weirdo, but like when you're not aware of that and you're like, I am the moral arbiter of conservatism, I am the moral arbiter of nationalism, it's like, it's all a LARP. Like, to put it very simple, and then we will move on to the next two portions of this conversation, what Nick did with the boys over the weekend is like what normal people do. It's what normal people do. Like, there were multiple, guys, like normative, like optically normative, like athletic white guys walking up to Nick and shaking his hand and taking pictures with him. Like that's how you know that Nick has won. That's how you know that these men have garnered a organic, like, real base of real actual people, as opposed to these freaks on X and social media. So the fact that this is just like nerd projection cannot be overstated. This is just straight up fucking nerd projection. Like, it's what it is. And it has to be emphasized, because this is another problem with conservatism, and more specifically broadly the modern political terrain. It is all performative. It is all, as they say, fucking jester. So we'll move on from that to the next conversation, which the revealing of how this whole situation, and it's honestly completely correlated to the first analysis and observation of the reaction of this situation, which is how all this reveals the liberal undertones and feminist undertones of society. As I mentioned earlier in this update video, when discussing the first level of analysis, how it's skin deep, it's dorky, it's superficial, nonsensical, moralizing. This also reveals a reality that our culture is deeply liberal and deeply feminist. Why do I say that? Nala. Do we all remember Nala, the former OnlyFans woman? The former OnlyFans girl who said in detail that she reveled when she was, involved in OnlyFans. She reveled in turning men gay. She saw, like, I'm not going to go into it. She did unspeakable sexual things to men on camera. She engaged in the most hedonistic, debaucherous sexual acts on camera, profited to the tunes of millions of dollars, and also refused to, like, give her money away to charity upon her conversion. Do you remember that bitch? That bitch is still allowed in the broader ranks of, like, mainstream conservatism. Now, there's a few people on the dissident right and the far right that counter signal her, but quite frankly, these people don't really matter. Like, the people that are, like, kind of, you know, the only people that are kind of relevant that have counter signaled her are people like ... Nick Fuentes, Sneako, Andrew Tate, the broader sort of, like, America First Groyper faction of the dissident right, and, like, elements of the, we'll say, coherent red pill. But outside of that spectrum, the mainstream conservative movement, the palatable conservative movement, has embraced this woman. She is a whore Babylon. She is a slut. And she's one among many. Lauren Southern, who completely made she made a name for herself by being ran through by the entirety of the alt-right in 2016, 17, 18, and 19. And these are just two examples of whores. Of whores of Babylon. But then you shift over to, like, Andrew Tate. You shift over to people like Tristan Tate. You shift over to people like Clavicular. You shift over to people like Sneako. And the argument's like, okay, well, Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate engaged in pornography. It's like, okay, yeah, they did. So if you're going to crash out on Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, then you need to crash out on literally everyone that's ever engaged in pornography ever. They need to be shunned from public life, number one. They need to be forever condemned because there's no redemption by your own metric. That's number one. But number two, as far as I know, the Tates are no longer engaging in that currently. Now, I could be wrong. And if they are, that's obviously disgusting and immoral. And Nick has also called this out before, that he does not agree with the practice of being a pornographer, and he believes he wants to usher in a society where pornographers are thrown in jail. But nevertheless, as far as I know, and I've been looking, there is no information, there is no evidence that the Tate brothers are currently engaged in pornography, and that they are promulgating it, and that they are bolstering it. What we do know is they made a lot of money engaging in it. They have since left it behind. And they have left it behind. And again, not a fan of all their theology, not a fan of their racial takes, if I'm being quite frank, not a fan of their views on how men should deal with the malignancy of the unrestrained feminine from women. However, they have brought the conversation to the point that it needs to be, which is a conversation of patriarchy, a conversation of, dare I say, necessary misogyny. And they have been loyal specifically to Nick and the broader sort of, we'll say, Jewish skeptical conversation of the emergent modern revanchist far right wing. Same with Myron Gaines. You can make the same argument. Oh, Myron Gaines sleeps around. Oh, Myron Gaines, I believe, is in an open relationship or something. You know, he's very liberal with his sexual practices, and he's a Muslim. Okay, well, Myron Gaines blew up his celebrity profile to, again, hunker down and call out Jewish power and decide with Nicholas J. Fuentes. The same thing with Sneako. These men have actually sacrificed things. You know, I saw Lucas Gage on X make this great point. He's like, you can sit there and call people degenerates, but they have sacrificed. What the fuck have you done? What the fuck have you created? Literally nothing. You've made absolutely nothing. You've produced absolutely nothing. But again, the reason why they're being attacked has really nothing to do with their past or current immoral stances. It's everything to do with the fact that they are the archetype of hyper-chauvinistic counter-Judeo, which will lead us into the very final aspect of analysis of this whole story. They are the archetype of the modern chauvinistic, we'll say misogynistic, right-wing male, red pill male. And this clavicular is also in the same camp as well, and so is Nick. These men collectively, regardless of their particular nuances or the things that distinguish themselves from one another, they are archetypes of chauvinism. They are archetypes of, we'll say, memeable and popular and palatable so-called anti-Semitism. They make these things look attractive because these things are attractive because these things are true. The idea that men have to abandon not only just the idea of simping and worshiping women, they have to be somewhat very, in many cases, like condescending to women. They must be domineering to women. They must put women in their fucking place rhetorically and culturally. And they must also be detached from women. They must be detached culturally from women. And again, this is not to say, again, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, so is Nick, because he really is the center. He really is the center of all this ire. The other guys are sort of like, they're just sort of like casualties of war. You could say that it's probably equally Tate and Nick collectively, but it proceeds really from them at the very least. I would say Nick specifically, but Tate and Nick collectively, and then everything else proceeds from them, because they are like sort of like the real dons of this revanchist, modern, misogynistic, counter-Judeo far-right movement. And I guess I'll briefly address the white nationalist complaint too, because number one, there's a lot of simpery and a lot of feminism that happens within the far right. So many of these far right people that are involved in these movements, they entertain things like single moms. They entertain, you know how many whores, again, Lauren Southern, for an example, many more though, how many whores, absolute harlots, absolute fucking prostitutes occupy the far right white nationalist scene. It's almost the entirety of the women involved in that subculture. So there's that, but also there's a sort of impulse by them to be like, well, these are all brown people. It's like, okay, I want to address this well too, just briefly. It's sort of an aside, but it's all part of it. What is more white nationalist or more like, we'll say, colonialist? The white nationalist who ghettoizes his people into like the woods or on niche parts of the internet where they're exchanging slurs and wearing ridiculous outfits, and they're engaging in hyper antisocial behavior and being laughed at and being basically turned into the straw man for the liberal consensus to kill everyone that is pro-white, that is a white nationalist to a certain degree, that's reverent of white identity and wants to bring white identity to the forefront, or a movement of people that actually have realized that we are living in a unfortunate situation, an unfortunate state of an empire where the once strong white majority is now dwindling, and in order to promulgate an idea of white identitarianism, and we'll say white primacy, you might call it like, quasi-white supremacy, but I'd say white primacy specifically, you're going to have to get non-whites on board, obviously. And they have successfully done that. Now, you can sit there and say with Sneako and Tate, and the Tates rather, specifically, you can argue that they will counter-signal that, they will push against that. Myron hasn't. Myron's fully embraced it. I've had some issues with Myron in the last few weeks or so, but Myron's apparently squashed the beef with Nick, which is another issue because that's a stronger alliance. There's an alliance that was once in question that is now re-strengthened. So that's obviously a political threat to the enemies of these people. But again, you can argue about the nuances of some of these non-white people within this coalition. Well, they say this, they say that. It's like, yes, they have. And guess what? Myron has countered Sneako on stream about this. Nick has countered Sneako and Tate about this. Like, the conversation hasn't been relinquished. The conversation hasn't been like, oh, okay, well, since you're in the coalition now, since you're in the club, you can totally like counter signal white identity. That's never happened. That's not the conversation. It's not going to be the conversation, obviously. America First and Nick have successfully colonized non-whites into a pro-white mentality, which is the proper projection, the proper sort of positioning of a true white colonialist mindset. Unlike these losers like Handsome Truth and Paul Miller, who are on these terrible streams on Omegle, wearing ridiculous outfits, yelling slurs into the camera, talking to other freaks. Like, I saw this thing today with Paul Miller. He was talking to this guy. I don't know this weird Omegle far-right scene. It's fucking insane. This guy that's dressed like Leatherface from, like, a shitty low-rent version of Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's like, so we shouldn't be wearing expensive suits and drinking fine wine and hanging out in the highest, the highest level of clubs and establishments and making the far-right appealing and attractive and high, elite, and we'll say trendy. We shouldn't be doing any of that. No, we should be wearing fucking clown makeup and dressing up like it's Halloween, yelling racial epithets into the screen because it's based, or dressing up like Nazis because it's fucking based. Like, it's insane. Like, the one thing that really annoys me, and we're gonna move to the very last part of this analysis and put a end to this particular video. the one thing that really annoys me about these people that do this sort of like concern trolling with Nick Fuentes in particular, but just in general, is that they have no solutions, and the things that they engage in are objectively absurd. They like, you see that people that criticize Nick, they're dressed terribly in videos. And admittedly, this, my update videos don't have the best audio, but they're supposed to be sort of like quick, not really quick, but very, kind of raw. Just put them out there. So I muster myself to the audio on my videos is not great, but I'm doing this as an update video, and I'm looking to lead back into my episodes, which will have nice camera, intro and outro. Like, I put effort into my work, is my point. These people, they're not fucking interesting. Like, have you watched the videos of these fucking people? Like, there's this woman, I forget her name. She's like this brunette white nationalist. She somehow has ties to Joel Davis. I think there might be, I think it's Joel's girlfriend or wife or whatever. Her videos are shit. She's like the talk about terrible audio. Like, you can't pay attention to anything because, again, the background noise is so overpowering. Like, her voice doesn't, cancel it out. Like, whatever. She looks like shit. She dresses like shit. She speaks like shit. Like, she's not fucking entertaining. Like, so you want us to be like that, like, dress like crap, look like crap, promote and get people to watch our content and watch and buy these ideas while looking like freaks, like looking like classless, like cultureless freaks. That's the thing that's the most frustrating thing about it. So it's almost like they want people to become mongrels. They want to mongrelize the audience. They want to lower the standard of the audience. And last but not least, the most important, I think, part of this analysis is how this also represents a genuine fear by the system and by the public of a palatable, normalized, revanchist far right. And again, this specifically highlights why the Jews in particular hate this. And that's why the various Jewish, we'll say, figures in Miami that have ties to the mayoral, and the gubernatorial sort of infrastructure revolving around Miami and Florida, all the elites in Florida band together to get these men not only banned from that particular club, the name escapes me. I do have it on the particular TFP post where we covered that there. But not only did they get them banned from this specific club for basically, having fun and singing along to a obvious satirical song. Apparently, they had people like Sneako banned from multiple resorts, multiple Airbnbs, multiple institutions that otherwise would be used for vacationing and traveling. They have gone nuclear, and they continue to go nuclear on these men because what they fear is the reality of which I laid out before. The Jews are not concerned about Patriot Front. The Jews are not concerned about white nationalist, big N, big W, big N, these sort of LARPers with the Totenkopfs and the swastikas, and they're on social media, sag-heiling, rocking like bizarre esoteric symbols. They're not afraid of that. They're not afraid of the Republican Party because they own the Republican Party. They're not afraid of the liberals because in most ways, they own the liberals and the leftists. Every other faction in the ether that I mentioned in this video or that you can conceive of in the political or social ether, minorities, left-wingers, Republicans, Democrats, the Jews either, white nationalists, they either actually own them, they actually control them, or they're so disorganized they pose no real threat. They're so disorganized and ineffective and off-putting they pose no real threat to the Jewish oligarch and the Jewish sort of interests that drive our country in 2026. America First specifically, the Groyper sphere specifically, and then this sort of broader like loose network of people like Myron Gaines, like Sneako, like Andrew Tate, like Lucas Gage, for example. There's many others. This sort of loose network that's sort of cropped up in the last few years of palatable clavicular, specifically, a guy that represents this sort of like this impulse by the young white man to reject the judgments of a disgusting, fallen, like ugly society. Like he's like, I reject the ugliness, the dregs of society judging me and telling me what I can and cannot do. This sort of coalition that's been formed in the last few years, it's indicative of a shift from these sort of unoptical, antisocial trimmings of previous generations of revanchist right wing, counter Judeo, pro-white identitarian right wing, to this more sleek, trendy, accessible iteration. That's why people on TikTok are resharing Nick Fuentes, and that's why people on TikTok and people in general are resharing the footage from this weekend's stream, because it's fun. It looks fun. They look good. They're talking to attractive women. They're having a good time. And objectively, they didn't again, there wasn't a video of them snorting coke off a girl's ass. Like, they objectively handled themselves in a very classy way. They hung out with attractive women in expensive suits. Where is the crime to do that? Where is the crime to go out and with the boys and hang out with attractive women in expensive suits and in a decorumed, cool, orful manner? There isn't one. And everyone knows it. And everyone, when they saw that video, they're like, wow, these guys are cool. And I saw all the people on social media who were freaking out, sans the Jews, because the Jews have a particular ethno-religious imperative behind their particular or their reasons for trying to condemn and deracinate and denigrate these men for doing what they did over the weekend. All the Gentiles that were piling in on them, it's like, dude, you guys are losers, and you're just doing the bidding of the Jews. Like, again, the more mainstream right-wing types, they're not really concerned about that. In many ways, they're philo-Semitic, right? They're pro-Judea, they're pro-Judeo, we'll say. The liberals and leftists, again, they might be anti-Israel and anti-Zionist, but they, by and large, if they're not Jews themselves, they are against anti-Semitism in a nominal sense. The non-whites, again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If that means counter-signaling white identity, they will gladly sort of echo the sentiments of the Jew. And then the white nationalists are just idiots. And it's like, for those people in particular, and then some of the sort of, anti-Zionist types that exist in other niche demographics in the ether, you're just doing the bidding of Jewish interests. You are just doing the bidding of the Zionists that you claim to fight against. You are being useful idiots, Shabbos goy, in the face of a actual, palatable, efficient, memeable, oriful, enjoyable, cool iteration of revanchist right-wing politics. But you don't care about that because you are jealous, because you are bitter, because you are petty. And I'll land the update video on this particular note. Myopic, selfish, self-aggrandizing sort of compulsions will be the death of America, will be the death of the broader right wing. If the broader right wing cannot prioritize, things like, I don't know, let's defang the intergenerational weight of Hitlerian rhetoric, pro-Hitlerian rhetoric. Let's normalize that. Let's normalize white identity. Let's push against Zionism meaningfully, and let's push against, we'll say, the malignant excesses of political Jewry. Let's push against the malignant excesses of feminism and liberalism. If people on the right, nominally speaking, but specifically the revanchist dissident right, cannot get their shit together, cannot collectivize in some sense to prioritize what matters, not only will they be destroyed, so will America. That's just it. And again, I know there's people that I respect that are seething, and I told them that, because by the way as well too, I forgot to mention this earlier in the update video intro. Always make sure to join me Wednesdays and Thursdays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on X for the weekly spaces. This week, the space will be schedule will be Thursday and Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, so be there for that. But I've invited them to the spaces to discuss this at length. Some of them declined. Some of them said they're going to do it. We'll see what happens. But you can have your opinions about the moral nuances of all this. That doesn't matter. Like, the fact that Tate used to do porn doesn't matter. I'm just going to be honest with you. The fact that Tate and Sneako are Muslims and Myron it doesn't matter. because their interests are not being, the reason why people are crashing out on them is not because they were pornographers or they're brown and Muslim. It's because they're affirming white identity. They are participating in the affirmation of far-right, pro-white identitarian politics to the masses. Don't you fucking understand that? Can't you see that? And it's like you are so obsessed with purity spiral, you're so obsessed with egoism that you will actually allow these sorts of victories to fall the wayside if it means you virtue signal in your echo chambers on social media. It's like, well, okay, go on with your return to the land nonsense. Go on with your Viking LARPs. Go on with your TradCon LARPs. Go on with all the sorts of things, and this is specifically to the right wing, whether it be dissident, moderate to nominally trad to far right, or to, dissident far right, nominally trad to moderate, rather. Go on with your we are the rational, colorblind, decorumed, nerdy politicos that go to CPAC and TPUSA. Do your LARP, whatever your LARP might be. Moderation, far-right extremism, traditional Catholicism, whatever your fucking LARP is. Keep your LARP up and see how long you'll have to live. Because you know what? The left doesn't fucking care. The left will not differentiate Andrew Tate from Charlie Kirk. The left will not differentiate Nicholas J. Fuentes from Ryland Holland, or whatever his name is, from any Republican who's involved in the party. The only time they'll do that is if the Republican comes out and says, I am a progressive leftist Republican who is going to advocate on behalf of hyper left-wing Marxist interests. If you do not do that, if you promote traditionalism and you promote Christianity and you promote anti-white, you promote a rhetorical or political push against anti-whiteism, you will be treated just like these men. So, LARP away, but your extinction will be imminent. And for me, this is a W. I think the Seething was hilarious. I think the video was great. And at the end of the day, it's been said before, but it must be said again. America first is fucking inevitable. And with that said, guys, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys later.